attention to the first reading or to the psalm or to the gospel I just proclaimed, I'll make this real simple. All of us sheep, listen up. Okay? Notice I didn't say all you sheep. Sit up. All right? The message is really clear and it's really powerful and it's wonderful and it's a challenge. But I have to start by telling you that as an American, I know very little about royalty, although we have a couple of families here who have more experience with such things. We have our celebrities, of course. I don't know if they're royalty. Do you think of A-Rod or the Kardashians or the type that Jesus had in mind when he talks about royalty? That's a joke, guys. I'm on cold medication. I feel like this is the best I can do. And if I sink you out with a sonic piece to kiss you, I'm coming after you to pass on what I have. It's an amazingly interwoven theme. And it's something that hopefully will make you stop and sit up, take notice, take a look into your heart. You've heard the words. Hopefully in this parish we do try to live those words, but it's always a good reminder. Jesus speaks of himself coming in glory, like a king, tapping into those images. Sitting on a throne of glory, and in all of the images of power and majesty and judgment and accountability we associate with those in authority. The prayers of our tradition remind us that Jesus himself identified himself as this type of animal. We call him the Lamb of God, that image. The sacrifice was offered for us. He offered himself on the altar of a cross. But he is the universal king who claims dominion over all creation, and one day he will come and hold us accountable for what we did with his kingdom. So mixed into all this imagery of power, there is the upside-down world that Jesus always creates. And he says very simply, he aligns himself with those who are oppressed. He aligns himself with the have-nots. Who did he choose to eat with? Who did he choose to associate with? They were basically those who were looked down on. These are the sinners and the poor and women. And not just women of bad reputation, women of any reputation, because you're on the bottom half of the social scale in that culture. With criminals and terrorists and the religious phonies, he associated with the people you don't want your kids to grow up to be, or the people you don't want your kids hanging out with. And yet, that's who he associates with. He identifies himself with the least. And when the first Christians heard him and heard this parable being told over and over again in their worship services, whatever you did to the least of my brothers, you did to me, they were happy about it because Christianity was made up of the dregs of society. And Jesus is saying, hey, someone should take care of us, even if we can't take care of each other. But guess what happened over the course of time? We became respectable. We became middle class and upper class. And now we have to hear those words in another way. Whatever we don't do to the least of those around us, we are turning our back on the Lord, who will one day return the favor in kind. He's the king who still identifies himself with the least. He's the one that says, you've got to love your sisters and brothers in this community, and you have to turn to those and seek out those who are poor and lost and alone and afraid and broken, and do what you can to be and for them and to help them. You cannot solve every person's problem. You cannot solve every problem of every person. But you can do something. So Jesus is still hungry. He still wears lousy clothing. He still walks into a soup kitchen in any of our communities. He's a person who, in my years in the city, I would see walking into a church, because all the churches in the city, as you know, will try to stay open during the daytime, especially in the winter. It's the only place of shelter for the homeless. I asked the question today, does Jesus walk into our community as the undocumented alien? As the mentally ill who have no home? As a single parent struggling with their child or children? Is he the guest who walks into a church wondering, is this a community that's going to welcome me? Because it takes a lot of guts to walk into the doors of a church and wonder what kind of reception you're going to get. Is he a person in prison who may be disgusted with what he did, or maybe not? Maybe thinks salvation is real or a crock, but he's still there to be ministered to. I can tell you that Jesus isn't found in the eyes of those in a nursing home who sit and wait for visitors who never show up. But sometimes are there when you are visiting with them, they don't know who you are anymore. We celebrate on this day the end of the church year and remind ourselves we are the sheep of his flock. He's the shepherd, we're here, guided by him. We remind ourselves that he is identifying his very being with those who are hurting. And what we do for those who are hurting is how we will be judged. And it's got to be the simple things. It doesn't have to be anything outstanding. Sometimes it's the intention. Barbara, you're here. I'm going to say a nice thing about you, and I want you to be angry with me, but there are a lot of things that people do not see, and I want to just give an example. Over a week ago, there was an incident here, and a poor gentleman in a lot of mental and emotional distress who needed help, and eventually EMS had to come and bring him to a hospital. It was the night of the choir rehearsal, and I will never forget this because you became a teacher that day. Barbara was the first one to arrive here when the police cars were here, and the ambulance were here, and the noise was here, and the bright lights. You walked into the building. Do you remember what you said to me as you walked into that building and into the church here? Because I do. You said, I'm a nurse, how can I help? The first words out of your mouth. See, I do pay attention to you. I really do. Ask the kids in confirmation class. Now listen to everything you say. There wasn't anything she could do at that moment, but the first words out of her mouth, I'm a nurse, I can help, what can I do? It's always the simple things. And the second thing Jesus says, don't be calculating about it. The TV cameras might not be there to record it, but we don't do it for other people's praise. We do it because it's right. Last year, this year again, Monday evenings, the young people in the confirmation class, I'm a little embarrassed, Izzy and Henry, or Henry's doing the babysitting, Izzy's sitting right here. And Daniel is at an event. We're hoping he is doing well, if not freezing, and someday gets back home because he has to travel that awful road known as the Jersey Turnpike to come home. So we wish him a safe home someday this week. But when these kids walk into the room, they know that they are presenting money for a gift for a poor family. They're going to choose the gift they're going to do. It's going to be something overseas. And I made one condition. I said, it's got to be your money. Whether you raise it yourself, whether you give it from your allowance, whether it's your own personal finances, I don't care. But don't pitch your parents up for it. It's got to be your gift. Did this a year ago. Remember, Aniston? The first thing they do when they walk into that room is they go to the jar and they put their gift in. Nobody sees them do it. I stay out of the room and I pretend not to watch them. Because it's important that they do it not because they're being watched, but because it's right. And they do. Our King one day will return. And he teaches us that real power is found in genuine relationships, in the healing power of love. And he will hold us accountable for the times we act and the times we turned our backs. So when he comes again in glory, when you stand before him, which side of the hand will you be, his right or his left? What will you do? And what will you say you've done